Welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. I'm joined by Logan Glaser once again. Logan, thanks for joining me on the show as always.
Yeah, as always, thanks for having me on, Jeff.
So Logan and I today, we're going to do something a little different. Usually we preview all the games and give you a different category that we're going to look at, like a sleeper or a fade. But since we're pretty much at the halfway point of the season, we thought we'd do something a little different. So Logan and I today, we're going to do a first half review and a second half preview of each position. So at each position, Logan and I are going to give you our first half surprise, our first half disappointment, and then our second half target and second half fade. So we're going to do that for every position: QB, running back, receiver, tight end. We're not going to do kicker and defense. Sorry about that, but we're not going to do that. We're going to stay away from that one because it's a little hard to predict. And a lot of people stream those positions anyway. So Logan and I are going to do that for all the positions. And as always, we're happy to answer any questions you might have. And we have one already fired up in the chat immediately as the show starts, Logan. People are wanting to get some information from us here. So we can answer that before we head into our content here. So the question was, would you trade Jacoby Myers and Demario Douglas for D-Hop? 20-man redraft PPR rosters: Lamar, JT, Aaron Jones, Tyreek Hill, Christian Kirk, Kittle, and Jacoby Myers. So Myers and Demario Douglas for D-Hop. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for that one, I would say no. But his follow-up question was also add in Lamar on the top side and Hurts on the bottom side. And I think I would do that just because it's a little bit of an increase from going from Lamar to Hurts because Hurts has a little bit more value, I think. So I think I would do that one. I think with this one, I would be a little skeptical because I'm not a huge DeAndre Hopkins fan, even though he had a great 3-touchdown performance last week. But I'm interested to see how well Demario Douglas does for the Patriots, being in that number one wide receiver role. He was a top waiver wire ad this week. So I'm really intrigued to see how he does.
And I also think that Jacoby Myers is a little underrated. I know he's coming off a poor performance, but I mean, they're going to revamp things now. It's got to help that offense a little bit. And he's been pretty steady. So I don't know if I would do that either. I just think that's a lot. I agree with you. I think the second trade sounds better, in my opinion, switching up those QB positions there. So I like that. I agree with you there, Logan. So let's jump into this now. Should be a lot of fun talking about this. So let's do the QB position first, Logan. So we're going to look at the surprise, disappointment, second half targets, second half fade. And someone already put in the chat as well their first half disappointment for receivers. So I'm good with that too. If you want to put in your thoughts on this, you want to add your disappointments and surprises, we're good for that too. We'll definitely mention those on the air. So Logan, I'll let you go first. Who's your surprise at the QB spot?
Yeah, surprise for the first half has been Sam Howell for me. So he's ranked as the 8th overall fantasy quarterback. Most leagues, he was undrafted. He's averaging 21.5 points per game. He had 36 fantasy points last week against Philadelphia. Half of his game so far, he's thrown over 290 passing yards, and he's really come out of nowhere. And it's mainly due to Washington playing from behind. They pass 50 plus times a game, as we've seen in recent games for the Commanders. But he's really surprised me, and he has fantasy value. I feel comfortable starting him in my lineups each fantasy week if you don't have one of those star fantasy quarterbacks. So it's a guy I feel comfortable with that was going undrafted.
I agree with you, and I think he looks the part as well. He looks like a legit NFL starting quarterback. I had some concerns about him going into the season, but he surprised me too. I think that's a good call there. My surprise is Russell Wilson. So I was expecting very little from him this year. He's actually 12th in fantasy quarterback scoring right now. He has 3 games with 20-plus fantasy points, 2 300-plus passing yard games as well. He is ahead of guys like Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford, Geno Smith. I had little faith in him. I guess I should have expected better things from the new coaching staff there, but I was expecting very little, and he's been worse some starts this year, and I think he could be the rest of the way as well because they're another team that plays behind at times. Who knows what's going to happen with them after their Kansas City upset, so maybe that'll get them going. But overall, Wilson's been a pleasant surprise for me. All right, Logan, let's go the other route. How about disappointment? Who's your
Yeah,
first?
disappointment for QB so far for me has been Joe Burrow. So Burrow has played better recently, but I'm looking at this as a whole first half altogether. He ranks 20th overall at QB without missing a game. He dealt with injuries in the first couple of games. He looks fully healthy now, so I don't expect that to continue for the second half. But the first half was just so poor. He started the season off with 4 points, 18, 11, and 7. And that can put you in a big hole in your fantasy season, off to an 0-4 start, possibly, if you had him at your quarterback position. Because with that, you'd rather just have him not play and get a replacement than put
It's
up those
true.
numbers. But he's definitely been a disappointment for me so far with how high of expectations we had for him where he was being
Yeah,
drafted.
definitely. It seems like that calf injury definitely wasn't a
Oh, yeah.
factor for him
It
early in the
was
season. And
major impact for him. But now he looks better. He had a great week last week, so we'll see if that continues. A primetime matchup this week.
I agree. He does look much better. I'm expecting big things from him in the second half. So my disappointment is Daniel Jones. So he's been hurt once again. He's due back this week, but even before that, he had fewer than 14 fantasy points 4 of his first 5 games this year. He had one really big game in week 2. He's done nothing besides that. I thought maybe his rushing totals would help him out. His rushing totals haven't been horrible, but his passing totals have been so bad that it's outweighed that. So he has been just a disaster. I thought he was going to take a step forward this year. Hasn't been the case. Their receiving core still is the issue, in my opinion. They don't have anybody there. Darren Waller was the big pickup. He's been hurt off and on again, which has been a theme for him throughout his career. So Daniel Jones has been my first half disappointment. Danny Dimes just hasn't been getting it done for me. All right, so now let's talk about the second half QB position. So we're going to give you guys that we think maybe you could, maybe buy low on, or if you want to go and get them now before their value goes up too high. So our first one is second half target for the QB position. Who's your guy there?
Yeah, I'm targeting, and who I think will be a star is going to be Joshua Dobbs. So transfer over from Arizona to Minnesota, and that's a complete flip the script for talent-wise for him. He goes to an offense loaded with talent. He's got Jefferson, who's going to be returning next week when Dobbs makes his debut with them, or supposedly will make his debut with them. You got Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, even K.J. Osborne as a fourth option is great, and that's a big upgrade from going from Marquise Brown as your number one and Rondell Moore / Michael Wilson as number 2 option. So Dobbs was ranked 16th overall in fantasy QB scoring with Arizona. Cousins was number 7 with Minnesota. So I expect Dobbs' numbers to increase even more. He got it done with running and through the air. So I expect him to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback or around that mark when he transfers over to Minnesota.
I like that call. Definitely intriguing to see what he does going forward. My pick is Dak Prescott. So he has 2 straight games with 27 plus fantasy points. He started the year really slow, but I think he was just trying to get a feel for that offense in Dallas. It's a new offense. Mike McCarthy went to more of a West Coast style, but now he's getting it going, and he looks good, in my opinion. They don't run the ball very well right now either. Tony Pollard's done very little on the ground. So I think Prescott's set up for a really good finish. He has some favorable games going forward as well. Seattle, Philadelphia, Miami, Detroit. So I think those are all games that could be shootouts. I'm expecting really, really big finish from Prescott. So if you had him and you're disappointed with his play early in the season, he's going to start to get it going. So I like him going forward. All right, how about the opposite end of our second half now? Fades. Guys you think might not finish quite as strong as they have started the season. Who's your QB?
Yeah, you still have to start him in these leagues, but I think he's going to be putting up less numbers, and that's going to be Justin Herbert, who ranks the overall number 3 fantasy QB so far. He's going to be without Mike Williams for the second half with his injury out for the season. And the Chargers just have a really hard upcoming schedule, so that schedule definitely scares me away with them. They're playing the defenses of Jets, Lions, Packers, Ravens, Pats, Buffalo, and KC. So that's not a very easy schedule. And that's one of the main things I look at when I look at positions to be targeting for players for my lineups and upcoming games. Definitely the schedule and game script plays a huge factor along with talent. Justin Herbert has the talent. He's got Keenan Allen there, but again, he's missing Mike Williams in that hard schedule. So I expect his numbers to dip off a little bit from that number 3 overall QB position.
My fade is a rookie, and it's CJ Stroud. So he has been tremendous to start the year. I think he's the best rookie quarterback right now ahead of Bryce Young. Aiden O'Connell is going to start playing as well. But I think Stroud's been very impressive. He's actually 13th overall in fantasy QB scoring. He's had a couple really big games. But as with a rookie, I feel like a lot of times the defenses start to catch up. They start to look at tendencies. And it showed the last couple games, in my opinion. He has less than 200 passing yards each of his last 2 games. He did not do that at all the first 4 games. He had 240 plus passing yards each of his first 4 games, each of his first 5 games, I should say. And last 2 games caught up with him a little bit. The Panthers, too, really shut him down last week. And they don't have a very good defense. So that worries me a little bit. So I think Stroud could be a little more hit or miss the rest of the way after his consistent start to the season. Okay, let's move on to the next position now, Logan, running back. So now we're going to look at running backs, our surprise, disappointment, targets, and fades. Couple guys that's showing up there are going to show up on our list here. So let's go with the surprise first, Logan. There's a lot of surprises, in my opinion. But who's your top surprise?
Yeah, there's a lot of surprises and disappointments from this running back position. There's a lot to choose from. Surprise, I'm going to go with Zach Moss. Overall, he's the number 5 running back so far in the season. He missed the first week even, and he's still number 5 overall. He has 6 touchdowns in 7 games. And even since Jonathan Taylor has returned, he's still put up great numbers. He has 34, 18, 7, and 14 even since Taylor has returned. So he's still getting plenty of volume in the offense. So I don't mind. I think he's a solid flex option moving forward and keeping in leagues, even though that Jonathan Taylor is back. Again, number 5 overall running back. And most leagues he wasn't drafted or going near the very end of drafts after that Taylor news. So he's definitely surprised me so far.
Definitely. He's been a huge surprise. Agree with that. Mine is Raheem Mostert. So he's actually was first overall in scoring for a lot of the season. He's faded some a little bit of a late, but he is racking up the touchdowns this year in that explosive offense. He has double-digit fantasy points all but 2 games. He's top 30 fantasy points 2 games. That huge 4-touchdown performance in week 3 really elevated his numbers. He has several multiple touchdown games as well. So he's been a huge surprise. Many people did not know who was even going to start in that offense. It's been Mostert, though, and he's a guy you got in the middle round of your drafts, a lot of drafts, in my opinion. So he's been tremendous value, and he's a league winner right now, in my opinion, with the way he played.
Big time.
All right. How about disappointment? Who's been a guy that you've been
Yeah, I think we share this, and that's Dameon Pierce. So he's only averaging 8 points a game. He has 0 receptions in the last 2 weeks. He's being drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in fantasy drafts. He's just been unable to convert goal line carries as well. So he has really struggled getting in the end zone. They've given him several carries inside the 5. He just has not been able to get into the end zone. But it's just been a very disappointing season overall, mainly due to that offensive line is a huge factor as Houston really struggles with that offensive line. But it's just not looked good for Dameon Pierce. There's also several other running backs you could throw in here with Najee and a couple others, but Pierce has definitely been a standout for me. That's not been good.
Pierce is my top disappointment as well. Totally agree with you. I have a lot of stock in him in a lot of leagues, and he's just been awful. So I'll pivot and give you another guy, like you said, a lot of different options to choose from. Najee Harris for me, another guy who I guess I shouldn't have trusted him to rebound, but he is. I thought he would a little bit. I thought the offense would be better. They made changes to the offensive line in the offseason, but he's just not getting it done. He has less than 50 rushing yards 4 times this year. He is not top 20 fantasy points in a game. He has fewer than 7 fantasy points each of his first 3 games, and then 4 of his first 5 as well. So he's really been a bust once again. So I'm steering clear from him going forward. I'm never going to trust him again. I hate to say it. All right, let's talk about a target now. How about a target at the running back spot for the second half?
Yeah, star, I think everyone in the fantasy industry is going to be looking at him for a star, and that's Devin Achane, number 16 running back overall, and he only played in 3 games so far. He's expected to return in week 11, and the 3 games he played in, he put up 51, 27, 23, and he looked absolutely electric running the ball. You could see just with his speed and that offense of Miami putting up numbers. He's definitely a guy to watch out for in the second half.
I agree. He was my pick too, so you stole that one from me, Logan. And he's been hurt, so a lot of people might forget about him. But I think Mostert might start fading actually a little bit.
Yes, yeah, I'm
Um,
trying to get rid of Mostert in all of my leagues currently.
yeah, he has fewer than 50 rushing yards each of his last 2 games. He has just 16 fantasy points total his last 2 games. Just one catch too, which is a concern. I think a chain's going to, kind of grab hold of that job. Mostert's older, and I think he could start to fade down the stretch a little bit. I think a chain's going to be the guy. So I agree with you there. A chain's my pick for the second half. I think he will be tremendous. Okay, how about a second half fade at running back?
Yeah, fade, I'm gonna go with Tony Pollard. So he's only had one game above 10 fantasy points since week 3. His volume has gone down a lot recently. So he started the season off with carries of 14, 25, and 23, a number of carries per game. And recently he's only had 11, 8, 15, and 12. So his rush attempts are a lot lower. It does have cause for concern for me. Dallas does have a great schedule upcoming, so that might help him a little bit, but the volumes just has not been as much as we've seen the first 3 weeks with him.
Yeah, I hope it changes. I have a lot of Pollard as well, so I hope you're wrong there, Logan. I hate to say it, but I think you may be right. They just have not been able to run the ball. It's one of the reasons I picked Prescott.
Yeah,
In my
I mean,
second
he
half
was
QB.
he was going in first rounds in draft. I think in our $10,000 syndicate, he went 5 overall, I believe is the number he went, and it just has not been first or second round
I
production.
agree. I agree. Unfortunately, my pick's Isaiah Pacheco. So he is 13th overall in fantasy running back scoring. He's been very good, very consistent, double-digit fantasy points all but 3 games. He gets double-digit carries all but 2 games as well. But I do not trust a running back in that offense. I don't do it. I don't like it. They don't get a ton of volume. They throw the ball a lot. They haven't used their running backs out of the backfield as much as I thought they would. And I know he has a great second half schedule. A lot of people have looked at Chiefs' second half schedule. It's not very good. They could put up some points, but I just don't trust a Chiefs running back, in my opinion. I'm not sure Pacheco's value is going to be higher than it ever will be at this point. He's 13th overall in fantasy running back scoring, so he worries me. I don't trust the Chiefs running back at this point. I hate to say it. I don't think there's a bell cow back in that offense.
Yeah, we've got a couple other questions that.
Yeah, let's hit them. So the first one was, who do I go with PPR? Tyjae Spears, Rashawn Johnson, or Imari DeMarcado? I think it's a close call with all three of those guys. Who do you think?
Yeah, I think all of them do not have great matchups this week. I think I would lean towards Johnson again, but I don't love his matchup going up against the Saints this week. But I think out of those 3 options, I would go with Johnson.
I agree with you that it's 3 similar plays, all not great options. If DeMarcado's healthy, I probably lean him just because of the volume. He got a ton of volume last week, and like you said, it's a terrible matchup, but he's going to get a ton of work running the ball and catching it too. But he's banged up a little bit, so you want to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, all 3 options, you're going up against either the Steelers defense, Cleveland defense, or the Saints, all on the road, all low-scoring games under 40 projected points.
So Logan says
options, but
Logan says Johnson, which I'm fine with. I say DeMarcado as long as he's healthy and playing. So I'm okay with Johnson too if DeMarcado has to sit. So good question, though. It's a tough decision. Good luck with that. So let's do one more question here before we get to the receiver. Would you drop Michael Mayer for Quentin Johnston? Have Logan Thomas at tight end?
What do you think on that, Jeff?
I actually think I would. Mayer we thought he might start breaking out here recently, but he's done nothing his last 2 games since that big performance. I wanted to look up his stats here, but I know he's done next to nothing in the last 2 games. So I think Johnston could start to get more work. He looked better last week as well. So I think I think I make that change. I don't love Thomas at tight end personally, but I think he's better than Mayer and will be more consistent. And if you need some depth at receiver, I might do that.
Yeah, and Palmer has also struggled with an injury recently. So Quentin Johnston's that wide receiver number 2 option for the Chargers is wide open, so he can easily take control of that. So I think I would be fine with that.
All right, let's look at receiver now, Logan. We're going to talk about surprises, disappointments, second half target, and fade at receiver. So who's your surprise at receiver?
Yeah, probably I would say the surprise in all of fantasy sports so far, and that was Puka Nacua. Number 7 wide receiver overall, averaging 19 points per game. Since Cup's returned, half of his games he's gone over 22 out of 4 games that Cup has been active. He's gone over 20 fantasy points. So he's still putting up production. Again, in almost every single league, he wasn't drafted except deeper leagues. So going from undrafted to be a top 7 wide receiver as a rookie has just been really impressive. So he's definitely been the biggest surprise for me so far.
I agree. He might be the biggest surprise in fantasy. He's been tremendous. I'll give you somebody different to be different, and that's Adam Thielen. I mean, he's 6th overall in fantasy receiver scoring. He has double-digit catches 3 times this year, at least 7 receptions, all but a game. He is just getting so much volume. I did not see this coming at all from Thielen. He is actually a guy I have on a decent amount of my rosters, though. I took some chances on him because I thought somebody had to catch passes that offense. So if you have him, you have been pleasantly surprised, and he's been a great, great pick. All right, how about a disappointment, Logan, at receiver?
Disappointment so far has been Calvin Ridley for me. So he ranks number 39 wide receiver overall, and he hasn't missed a game so far. Only 2 of his 8 games, he's gone over 11 fantasy points. And Christian Kirk has really established that number 1 wide receiver role for Jacksonville, which we all thought Ridley was going to have. Ridley went before Kirk in almost every single draft. Ridley was going end of 2, early 3 at the end of the season because there was so much hype from him on preseason. So he's definitely been a big disappointment for me so far.
My disappointment's Christian Watson. I know he's been banged up. As always, it's kind of been his MO to start his career, but even when he's playing, he's done very little. Romeo Doubs has gotten more targets. I just thought Watson might emerge as, even a low-end number 1 receiver or top number 2 in that offense as their top target, but he hasn't gotten it done. He's had some bad drops as well. I just thought he would be much better this year. I think there's still time for the second half of the season for him to get it going. But right now, Watson's been a really big disappointment for me. I hate to say it. And someone said T. Higgins for their disappointment. That's a great call too at the receiver spot. I definitely considered making him my pick for this list. All right, Logan, how about a target? Who's your second half target at receiver?
Yeah, I think who's going to probably be one of the top wide receivers in the second half, and that is going to be CeeDee Lamb. So he had 41 points last week. Cowboys have a great second half schedule. So out of all the teams, I think I would be targeting Cowboys wide receivers along with Dak Prescott. I think they just have a great second half schedule. As you mentioned, Dak is your QB to target. They got Giants, Washington, Seattle, Miami, Detroit, Philadelphia twice, and their defense has given up a ton of points. They're not as dominant as they were last year. So I think they've got a great upcoming schedule. Really sits well for teams pushing for the playoffs, especially if you have a good record so far and you're looking at weeks 15, 16, 17. Definitely target some Dallas players with that.
So my target is actually someone that has come up in the chat, and that's Marquise Brown. So he's actually been pretty good. 16 plus fantasy points 4 times this year. He had 15 last week. He's been really consistent as the top target in that offense. He racks up the weekly targets. They're playing from behind a lot. But Kyler Murray's coming back. That should be a big plus for that offense. I don't know if he's going to start this week. I think he might. But even if he doesn't start this week, he'll be back in week 10. Should give a shot in the arm to that defense. And I think Brown could be really good the rest of the way. He's 24th overall in fantasy receiver scoring right now. So he's been pretty good anyway. And now he gets Kyler Murray back. So he's a guy I'm really looking at. And the question for him was Hollywood Brown for a late 24 first to help a contender.
So for me, it depends on the rest of the roster. If he's going to be if you're struggling as a wide receiver and you need a wide receiver to start, I'm fine trading a late first for a guy like Hollywood Brown. Again, it depends if you already have an okay starting lineup with the wide receivers and he would only just be a plug and play option, then I would keep onto that first. I like packaging up like a late first along with another, like a player like Josh Downs, and then go after a star player personally if I'm in a dynasty league. So I like kind of going with that method instead of just getting a player that is kind of average, a little bit above average at that wide receiver core. So I like the package deals with that. And if you're in a dynasty league.
Yeah, I think late first is a little steep. I don't know how many you keep, so I don't know what the roster composition's like. That kind of plays into it too. If it's a heavy keeper league where the first round pick doesn't get you much, it can play a factor in it. But I think that might be a little steep. Like I mentioned, I do like Brown going forward. I think he's going to be good. And if you really need a receiver and it could put you over the top, if you have a good roster, I would consider it. But I think the late late first round might be a little steep for me. Okay, one more spot at the receiver, Logan. Second half fade. Who are you fading in the second half at receiver?
Yeah, I'm going to be fading DJ Moore. So he had that electric game a couple of weeks ago. I think it was about 4 weeks ago that where he put up 40+ points. But in his last 3 games, he's gone 10, 13, and 9. There's just a lot of uncertainty in Chicago at the QB position. Is Fields their guy? Are they going to go in a complete tank for Caleb Williams? So with Tyson Bagent at QB so far, he's put up is 13 points, and people are expecting so much more out of Moore after he put up 40+ fantasy points. So he's definitely going to be a guy that I'm going to be kind of fading down the stretch.
My fade is another guy that it got brought up in the chat here right after the other question. It's Mike Evans. So he is getting older, and I don't think they're going to be very good in the second half of the season. They had a good start to their year, but they're already starting to show signs of slowing down. He has fewer than 50 yards 3 of his last 4 games as well. So that worries me. He doesn't get a ton of volume catching the ball. It's touchdowns that have saved his fantasy value as scores 5 of 7 games. So if he doesn't find the end zone, he's not going to do a whole lot. So I think if you can trade him now, get some value for him, he's 11th overall in fantasy receiver scoring. So he still has gotten a lot of fantasy love because of those touchdowns, but I could see him not doing a whole lot in the second half. So we'll go into that question with him too. It's with Mike Evans being touchdown dependent, but solid, and K9 having a very tough schedule now. Who's K9? What am I missing?
I don't know.
You have any idea? I have no idea.
Know.
I don't know who K9 is. Would you trade K9, Evans, and Higgins for Kupp, Ridley, and Warren?
Depending on who that is, I would. He also said it could also be Kenneth Walker.
Oh, that's it. K3 is what he should have put. K3, that would make more sense.
Let's see. So it's Kenneth Walker, Evans, and Higgins for Kupp, Ridley, or Warren. Or you could switch out Kupp for Lamb is what it could be.
That's a tough one.
I think I would. I think I would honestly put Lamb instead of Kupp, just because Kupp has kind of been hit or miss so far since his return. Last week he had a very down week. His last 2 weeks has down weeks, but I think I would. I think Lamb is such a big upgrade over someone like Evans. Again, you're taking a hit with going from Kenneth Walker and Higgins down to Ridley and Warren, but I think that upgrade and that star potential would make it worth it.
I'm doing it if you get Lamb. If you can get Lamb in the trade, go for it, because I think he's going to be fantastic the second half of the season as well, kind of like Logan. So if you can get Lamb, do it. But if you can't get Lamb, I don't know. Kupp's been so down the last couple games, and now Stafford's hurt, so that worries me. I say if Lamb, go for it. All right, last position, Logan. We're going to look at tight end now. So tight end, as always, a tough one to figure out every season. Been a couple rookies that have been very good, though, this year, and some guys that we think could be good as well in the second half. So let's look at this tight end spot. Who's been your surprise at tight end this year?
Yeah, surprise, honestly, at tight ends, it's been pretty chalk almost, I want to say. If you go through the top players, it's kind of been exactly kind of what people kind of have projected at tight end. So my surprise, I'm going to go with is Taysom Hill. His last 3 games, he's gone 12, 17, and 23. So he's looked really good in his last 3 games. At RT Sports, he's a tight end, listed as a tight end. He's actually
been playing tight end this year.
He has been playing majority at tight end. So he's had a lot of receptions in the last couple of weeks, but he's last 3 games he's looked great, and I think he's almost going to have to be a starter moving forward at that tight end spot.
Yeah, now he's getting carries the last couple of weeks too, along with the catches. So yeah, he's really been a surprise once again. He's a good guy. I take him a lot in best ball leagues very late, just to, because you never know when he's going to have those big games. So I like him more in that format, but he's been more consistent this year. So my surprise is a rookie, and it's Sam Laporta. He's 3rd overall in fantasy tight end scoring. He's been really consistent, double-digit fantasy points, 5 of 8 games. His lowest point total of the season is 7.6. He has double-digit targets 3 times as well. You always worry about a rookie tight end. They say it takes time for them to adjust to the NFL, hardest position to learn. But Laporta has kind of broken that norm there, and he's been really, really good and a good offense as well. So good work if you drafted him this year because he's been really good. You likely got him super late in your draft as a number 2 tight end, and he's been a top 5 option all season long. All right, disappointment, Logan. I thought you were going to take Irv Smith here, but you didn't. That's your guy.
Just because he was expected to go at the very bottom of draft, so he didn't have much value. So he's kind of exactly where he's been for the season so far. But for disappointment, I'm going with Dalton Kincaid. As you mentioned, for a rookie tight end, it just takes them a long time to adjust. And that's been the case with Kincaid. So up until the last 2 weeks, he has not scored over 10 fantasy points. He's been great the last 2 weeks with knocks out. He's got 15 and 17. So I do think moving forward, it's wide open for Kincaid, and I like him moving forward. It's just been in the first half of the season. He has been disappointing because everyone was starting him the first couple of weeks. He was going in rounds 8 and 9 in fantasy drafts. So being in a starter's spot, putting up 5-6 fantasy points a game for the first couple of weeks, and it was just not living up to the hype at the beginning.
Yeah, mine's a guy who's been on this disappointment list a lot in recent years, and I guess I should have known better to think it might be different this year. But Kyle Pitts is my disappointment. Once again, just not getting used in that offense. Has fewer than 50 yards all but a game. Just 2 games with double-digit fantasy points. I mean, Jonnu Smith has outscored him many weeks, and he's the number 2 tight end. He gets more targets almost on a weekly basis as well. So I think Pitts is going to need a change of scenery at this point to be a better fantasy QB. Maybe Taylor Heineke getting inserted in the starting lineup will make a difference, but right now I just think Pitts is a huge bust for fantasy teams and a guy that I'm just staying away from going forward unless he gets a change of scenery or they get some stud quarterback that likes to target the tight end, because that's just not happening right now, unfortunately. All right, second half target, Logan. Who's your second half target at tight end?
Yeah, we're just going to be flip-flopping around at this tight end position, but my second half target is going to go with Sam Laporta. So he has 19-plus fantasy points in 3 out of 8 games so far in this season. He's been such a reliable target for Jared Goff. As you mentioned, as a rookie, it's pretty uncalled for at the tight end position to be that dominant, and he's been a consistent option also moving forward with that. So I really like him as a second half star.
My second half star is your guy who's disappointed you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're just flip-flopping back and forth here.
You're right. But last 2 games, 15-plus fantasy points each of his last 2 games, 15 targets. Dawson Knox is hurt, so Kincaid's on the field a little more. He has 13 catches on those 15 targets as well. So I think he's ready to take off. I think good things are going to be happening for Dalton Kincaid going forward. Should be a really good second half to the season for him. All right, second half fade, Logan. Who's your tight end fade?
Yeah, second half fade is going to be Kyle Pitts, who was your disappointment. But so he's only had 2 games above 10, as I mentioned. Taylor Heineke might help them a little bit. I think Heineke's going to be better at throwing the ball than Ritter was. So I think there is a little bit of optimism with him there. But then they also have Jonnu Smith, who's also kind of, I want to surprise me with the Falcons and Arthur Smith if Jonnu Smith now just puts up 15-plus fantasy points with Heineke at QB. But so Pitts is definitely going to be my fade just because the Falcons offense altogether has not been great.
I agree. So my big fade is Dallas Goedert. So Goedert has been really good a couple games this year. He has 2 games with 18-plus fantasy points. He's done nothing besides that, though. And for me, when the playoffs come around, I want consistency. And right now, he has not been consistent. I think he is going to be more inconsistent going forward. He's going to have a couple big games, but disappear other weeks. So if there's a guy on my roster that I can trade for that could be more consistent than him, I think that you can trade Goddard and try to get somebody a little more consistent, like an Evan Ingram or even David Njoku or Taysom Hill, like you mentioned. But I just think Goddard's a guy that scares me going forward because of his inconsistency. All right, Logan, let's get to a couple more questions here before we get out of here. We have a couple people in the chat been nice enough to stick around and talk to us on here. But this guy made a big move, traded Ford, Goddard, Diggs. So I'll be happy he traded Goddard for Etienne, Hawkinson, Devonta Smith. Good move.
I like it. I think I think coming back, you're getting 3 solid players out of that. Again, Diggs is the big guy that you're giving up, but the last couple games, Diggs hasn't been great. I mean, he hasn't been the first couple of weeks. He was one of the top wide receivers. Last couple of games, he's struggled a little bit. But you're getting 3 really solid players. I think Devontae Smith is also going to have a big rebound in the second half because AJ Brown is just taking up so many targets. But so overall, I think I like that move.
I do too. And I know the Hawkinson deal, people might be scared of him a little bit because they have a new QB, no Kirk Cousins, but he's been so consistent. And look at Dobbs, the way he threw to the tight end in Arizona. So I think it's going to happen again here. And I love getting Etienne. I just think he's a great pickup. He is so consistent. He's been great all year long. So I think you won that trade. I think it's a good move. He has a follow-up. Also, which side you taking full PPR rest of the season? Hurts Olave or Burrow and Puka?
I think I'm going to go with Hurts and Olave. I do think it's really close, as mentioned. I think you could go either way, but again, with uncertainty at QB for the Rams, along with Kupp being back, I don't know if Nakua is going to live up to Olave's status. And
I agree with that. I'm with you there. I think Burrow may edge out Hurts a little bit. I think it'll be close. I think Hurts is going to be good, though, as well. But Olave, I like him more. That offense is starting to click a little bit. So I think that's good news for the Saints. Derek Carr's looked a little better lately. So I think I go Hurts Olave there. I agree there. Let's see a couple more questions here before we get it. With people hitting us up, I'm happy to answer questions. Always a lot of fun to get your input here. So a little question for you. Flex PPR, pick one. James Cook or Trey McBride or Kareem Hunt? I guess that's just for this week.
Yeah, which one are you going with that for that, Jeff?
I like Cook.
I think I'm thinking Cook too. It'll also just depend on who's available for Buffalo for running back, because they kind of been spreading the ball out a little bit more. But I do like Cook out of those 3. I think I would go Hunt number 2 and then McBride 3 if I.
Yep, McBride's intriguing, but when I'm picking PPR in a flex spot for a PPR league, I like the running back. I just think it makes sense to go with the guy with the highest floor. And McBride, he could disappear and catch 2 passes, but at least Cook's going to get the double-digit carries, probably a couple catches as well. So I like him the most out of those options there. All right, another one. I want to trade for Tyreek. I have Kupp, Amari, Flowers, Pollard, Swift. He offered Hill for Kupp and Kamara. I said no. I actually agree. I don't think I would do that. Kamara is the number 1 fantasy running back the last 3 games, and Kupp's really good as well. I love getting Hill, but I think you're just giving up a little too much there. Maybe you can switch it up. I don't know. I mean, I would be okay Pollard for Hill, Pollard and Kupp for Hill maybe. I don't know if you do that since Pollard hasn't been very good.
Yeah, I think I would do that too, but Kamara's just been so dominant, and I think he was ranked like in the top 6 running backs, and he missed the first 3 weeks. So
yeah, I could see why I would not do that trade either. I don't think I want to get rid of Kamara. I do think Kupp's going to start rebounding a little bit in recent weeks. I love getting Hill. He's been tremendous. He's set up for a record-breaking season, but I don't think I would do Kupp and Kamara for Hill. I would try to get one of those other running backs to bite on, maybe Swift or Pollard. All right. How about we've got to get a couple more questions and we got to get out of here. Can you rate my 16-man lineup? I don't know if I'm going to rate 16-man lineup. That's a lot of players.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Trade James Cook and Marquise Brown and receive Mixon. Am I giving up too much? I like it because Cook is inconsistent. Mixon, I think, is going to have a good second half. I'm okay with doing that, especially if you're not going to have Brown in your lineup. Is Brown maybe on your bench most likely? Cook's probably a guy that maybe you're starting him as your number 2 or your flex and you want to get Mixon instead. I would go for it. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think Mixon is in line to have a big second half. Again, no one's going to be competing for touches for him in Cincinnati's backfield, so I'm perfectly fine with doing that.
So the owner said he's not giving up Pollard on top of Kupp just for Hill. I understand that. I just think Kamara has more value than Pollard right now, in my opinion. So I'm just trying to throw other options for you out there. So good luck in trying to get that trade straightened out. Let's do one more question before we get out of here, Logan. Need 2 flex between Deontay Johnson, Josh Downs, Nico, and Rashid Shaheed. So that's a close one in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a close one. I think I'm gonna go with Nico Collins is definitely one. I think I'm gonna be for sure fading Shaheed. I think just because he's so touchdown dependent. I like him in best ball leagues, but in regular leagues, I think it's just scary for me to play him. So I think I'm gonna go with between who they're facing, Deontay, Josh Downs, and Nico. So a lot depends on the matchup. But Josh Downs has been a very bright spot in that Colts offense. So I can't
Yeah,
fault him.
I like Downs for sure against Carolina, who played better defensively last week. I still don't think they're very good defensively. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I like Downs and Nico as well. I think Shaheed is good, though. I would not be afraid to use him. I think he's going to be a little more hit or miss, but I like him a lot going forward. I think he's going to be a little more consistent. But for this week, I think going Downs and Nico Collins, I think Collins is going to rebound. They're going to get that passing game going there. All right. We got one more question on here before we go, Logan. Trade away Sutton and Brian Robinson for Mostert.
I don't think I would just because of Gene coming back. Like we mentioned, I'm trying to get rid of Mostert as much as I can in my leagues. So I think I would hold on to them. Sutton's had a really good season so far. So I'm keeping both him and Robinson instead of Mostert.
So here's my thought. If you're playing Sutton on a weekly basis, I would not do the trade. But if you're not playing Sutton, or if he's your flex play or bench player, because he's on a lot of teams because a lot of people took him later in drafts, then I would do the trade. Because while I am fading Mostert second half of the season, I do still think he has value, especially around the goal line and a great offense. And I like him a lot better than Brian Robinson. So if you're not using Sutton, I would make the trade. But if you are using Sutton at receiver, then I probably wouldn't. All right, Logan, that was a lot of fun. A lot of questions, a lot of good banter between us about our surprises, disappointments, targets, and fades. It's been a lot of fun talking to you today on the show, as always.
That's been a great first half of the season so far.
It has. Good luck to everybody out there, too. All your questions, we really appreciate you watching and giving us some feedback on there, and we're happy to answer any questions you have as well. So great job to everybody out there, and thanks to Heather for producing as always, and thanks to you, Logan. Good luck everybody out there in week 9. This has been Jeff Paur with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.